Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveller. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth, then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same, and both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. I'm going out to clean the pasture spring. I'll only stop to rake the leaves away, and wait to watch the water clear I may. I shan't be gone long. You come, too. I'm going out to fetch the little calf that's standing by the mother. It's so young, it totters when she licks it with her tongue. I shan't be gone long. You come, too. There was never a sound beside the wood but one, and that was my long scythe whispering to the ground. What was it whispered? I knew not well myself. Perhaps it was something about the heat of the sun, something perhaps about the lack of sound, and that was why it whispered and did not speak. It was no dream of the gift of idle hours or easy gold at the hand of fay or elf. Anything more than the truth would have seemed too weak to the earnest love that laid the swale in rows, not without feeble-pointed spikes of flowers, pale orchises, and scared a bright green snake. The fact is the sweetest dream that labor knows. My long scythe whispered and left the hay to make. When I see birches bent to left and right across the lines of straighter, darker trees, I like to think some boy's been swinging them. But swinging doesn't bend them down to stay as ice storms do. Often you must have seen them loaded with ice a sunny winter morning after a rain. They click upon themselves as the breeze rises and turn many-colored as the stir cracks and crazes their enamel. Soon the sun's warmth makes them shed crystal shells, shattering and avalanching on the snow crust. Such heaps of broken glass to sweep away, you'd think the inner dome of heaven had fallen. They are dragged to the withered bracken by the load, and they seem not to break. Though once they're bowed so low for long, they never right themselves. You may see their trunks arching in the woods years afterward, trailing their leaves on the ground like girls on hands and knees that throw their hair before them over their heads to dry in the sun. But I was going to say, when truth broke in with all her matter of fact about the ice storm, I should prefer to have had some boy bend them as he went out or in to fetch the cows, some boy too far from town to learn baseball, whose only play was what he found himself, summer or winter, and could play alone. One by one he subdued his father's trees by riding them down over and over again until he took the stiffness out of them, and not one but hung limp. Not one was left for him to conquer. He learned all there was to learn about not launching out too soon and so not carrying the tree away clear to the ground. He always kept his poise to the top branches, climbing carefully with the same pains you use to fill a cup up to the brim and even above the brim. Then he flung outward, feet first with a swish, kicking his way down through the air to the ground. So was I once myself a swinger of birches, and so I dream of going back to be. It's when I'm weary of considerations, and life is too much like a pathless wood where your face burns and tickles with the cobwebs broken across it, and one eye is weeping from a twig's having lashed across it open. I'd like to get away from earth a while, and then come back to it and begin over. May no fate wilfully misunderstand me, and half grant what I wish, and snatch me away not to return. Earth's the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. I'd like to go by climbing a birch tree, and climb black branches up a snow-white trunk toward heaven, till the tree could bear no more, but dipped its top and set me down again. That would be good both going and coming back. One could do worse than be a swinger of birches. My long two-pointed ladder's sticking through a tree toward heaven still, and there's a barrel that I didn't fill beside it, and there may be 2 or 3 apples I didn't pick upon some bough, but I am done with apple picking now. Essence of winter sleep is on the night, the scent of apples. I am drowsing off. I cannot rub the strangeness from my sight I got from looking through a pane of glass I skimmed this morning from the drinking trough and held against the world of hoary grass. It melted, and I let it fall and break, but I was well upon my way to sleep before it fell, and I could tell what form my dreaming was about to take. Magnified apples appear and disappear, stem end and blossom end, and every fleck of russet showing clear. My instep arch not only keeps the ache, it keeps the pressure of a ladder round. I feel the ladder sway as the boughs bend, and I keep hearing from the cellar bin the rumbling sound of load on load of apples coming in, for I have had too much of apple picking. I am overtired of the great harvest I myself desired. There were 10,000 fruit to touch, cherish in hand, let down and not let fall. For all that struck the earth, no matter if not bruised or spiked with stubble, went surely to the cider apple heap, as of no worth. One can see what will trouble this sleep of mine, whatever sleep it is. Were he not gone, the woodchuck could say whether it's like his long sleep as I describe its coming on, or just some human sleep. I went to turn the grass once after one who mowed it in the dew before the sun. The dew was gone that made his blade so keen before I came to view the leveled scene. I looked for him behind an aisle of trees. I listened for his whetstone on the breeze, but he had gone his way, the grass all mown, and I must be as he had been, alone. As all must be, I said within my heart, whether they worked together or apart. But as I said it, swift there passed me by, on noiseless wing, a bewildered butterfly, seeking with memories grown dim o'ernight, some resting flower of yesterday's delight. And once I marked his flight go round and round, as where some flower lay withering on the ground. And then he flew as far as I could see, and then on tremulous wing came back to me. I thought of questions that have no reply, and would have turned to toss the grass to dry. But he turned first, and led my eye to look at a tall tuft of flowers beside a brook, a leaping tongue of bloom the scythe had spared, beside a reedy brook the scythe had bared. The mower in the dew had loved them thus, by leaving them to flourish, not for us, nor yet to draw one thought of ours to him, but from sheer morning gladness at the brim. The butterfly and I had lit upon, nevertheless, a message from the dawn, that made me hear the wakening birds around, and hear his long scythe whispering to the ground, and feel a spirit kindred to my own, so that henceforth I work no more alone. But glad with him, I worked as with his aid, and weary sought at noon with him the shade, and dreaming as it were held brotherly speech with one whose thought I had not hoped to reach. Men work together, I told him from the heart, whether they work together or apart. My sorrow, when she's here with me, thinks these dark days of autumn rain are beautiful as days can be. She loves the bare, the withered tree. She walks the sodden pasture lane. Her pleasure will not let me stay. She talks, and I am fain to list. She's glad the birds are gone away. She's glad her simple worsted gray is silver now with clinging mist. The desolate, deserted trees, the faded earth, the heavy sky, the beauties she so truly sees. She thinks I have no eye for these, and vexes me for reason why. Not yesterday I learned to know the love of bare November days before the coming of the snow, but it were vain to tell her so, and they're better for her praise. I have been one acquainted with the night. I have walked out in rain and back in rain. I have outwalked the furthest city light. I have looked down the saddest city lane. I have passed by the watchman on his beat and dropped my eyes, unwilling to explain. I have stood still and stopped the sound of feet, when far away an interrupted cry came over houses from another street, but not to call me back or say goodbye. And further still, at an unearthly height, one luminary clock against the sky proclaimed the time was neither wrong nor right. I have been one acquainted with the night. Tree at my window, window tree, my sash is lowered when night comes on, but let there never be curtain drawn between you and me. Vague dream head lifted out of the ground, and thing next most diffuse to cloud. Not all your light tongues talking aloud could be profound. But tree, I have seen you taken and tossed, and if you have seen me when I have slept, you have seen me when I was taken and swept and all but lost. That day she put our heads together. Fate had her imagination about her, your head so much concerned without her, mine with inner weather. Fred, where is north? North is there, my love. The brook runs west. West running brook, then call it. West running brook, men call it to this day. What does it think it's doing running west when all the other country brooks flow east to reach the ocean? It must be the brook can trust itself to go by contraries the way I can with you and you with me, because we're, I don't know what we are. What are we? Young or new? We must be something. We've said we two. Let's change that to we three. As you and I are married to each other, we'll both be married to the brook. We'll build our bridge across it, and the bridge shall be our arm thrown over it, asleep beside it. Look, it's waving to us with a wave, to let us know it hears me. Why, my dear, that wave's been standing off this jut of shore. The black stream, catching on a sunken rock, flung backward on itself in one white wave, and the white water rode the black forever, not gaining, but not losing, like a bird, white feathers from the struggle of whose breast flecked the dark stream and flecked the darker pool below the point, and were at last driven wrinkled in a white scarf against the far shore alders. That wave's been standing off this jut of shore ever since rivers, I was going to say, were made in heaven. 'Twasn't waved to us. 'Twasn't, yet it was. If not to you, it was to me in an annunciation. Oh, if you take it off to Ladyland, as 'twere the country of the Amazons, we men must see you to the confines of and leave you there, ourselves forbid to enter. It is your brook. I have no more to say. Yes, you have too. Go on. You thought of something. Speaking of contraries, see how the brook in that white wave runs counter to itself. It is from that in water we were from, long, long before we were from any creature. Here we, in our impatience of the steps, get back to the beginning of beginnings, the stream of everything that runs away. Some say existence, like a Pierrot and Pierrette, forever in one place, stands still and dances, but it runs away. It seriously, sadly runs away, to fill the abyss's void with emptiness. It flows beside us in this water brook, but it flows over us. It flows between us to separate us for a panic moment. It flows between us, over us, and with us. And it is time, strength, tone, light, life, and love, and even substance lapsing unsubstantial, the universal cataract of death that spends to nothingness, and unresisted, save by some strange resistance in itself, not just a swerving, but a throwing back, as if regret were in it and were sacred. It has this throwing backward on itself, so that the fall of most of it is always raising a little, sending up a little. Our life runs down in sending up the clock. The brook runs down in sending up our life. The sun runs down in sending up the brook. And there is something sending up the sun. It is this backward motion toward the source, against the stream, that most we see ourselves in, the tribute of the current to the source. It is from this in nature we are from. It is most us. Today will be the day you said so. No, today will be the day you said the brook was called West Running Brook. Today will be the day of what we both said. Mary sat musing on the lamp flame at the table, waiting for Warren. When she heard his step, she ran on tiptoe down the darkened passage to meet him in the doorway with the news and put him on his guard. Silas is back. She pushed Warren outward with her through the door and shut it after her. Be kind, she said. She took the market things from Warren's arms and set them on the porch, then drew him down to sit beside her on the wooden steps. When was I ever anything but kind to him? But I'll not have the fellow back, he said. I told him so last haying, didn't I? If he left then, I said that ended it. What good is he? Who else will harbor him at his age for the little he can do? What help he is, there's no depending on. Off he goes always when I need him most. He thinks he ought to earn a little pay, enough at least to buy tobacco with, so he won't have to beg or be beholden. All right, I say, I can't afford to pay any fixed wages, though I wish I could. Someone else can, then someone else will have to. I shouldn't mind his bettering himself if that were what it was. You can be certain when he begins like that, there's someone at him trying to coax him off with pocket money in haying time when any help is scarce. In winter he comes back to us. I'm done. Shh, not so loud. He'll hear you, Mary said. I want him to. He'll have to sooner or later. He's worn out. He's asleep beside the stove. When I came up from Rose, I found him here, huddled against the barn door, fast asleep. Miserable sight, and frightening, too. You needn't smile. I didn't recognize him. I wasn't looking for him. And he's changed. Wait till you see. Where did you say he'd been? He didn't say. I dragged him to the house and gave him tea and tried to make him smoke. I tried to make him talk about his travels. Nothing but do. He just kept nodding off. What did he say? Did he say anything? But little. Anything. Mary confessed he said he'd come to ditch the meadow for me. Warren. But did he? I just want to know. Of course he did. What would you have him say? Surely you wouldn't grudge the poor old man some humble way to save his self-respect. He added, if you really care to know, he meant to clear the upper pasture, too. That sounds like something you've heard before. Warren, I wish you could have heard the way he jumbled everything. I stopped to look 2 or 3 times. He made me feel so queer to see if he was talking in his sleep. He ran on Harold Wilson. You remember, the boy you had in haying 4 years since? He's finished school and teaching in his college. Silas declares you'll have to get him back. He says they two will make a team for work. Between them they will lay this farm as smooth. the way he mixed that in with other things. He thinks young Wilson a likely lad, though daft on education. You know how they fought all through July under the blazing sun, Silas up on the cart to build the load, Harold along beside to pitch it on. Yes, I took care to keep well out of earshot. Well, those days troubled Silas like a dream. You wouldn't think they would, how some things linger. Harold's young college boy's assurance piqued him. After so many years, he still keeps finding good arguments he sees he might have used. I sympathize. I know just how it feels to think of the right thing to say too late. Harold's associated in his mind with Latin. He asked me what I thought of Harold saying he studied Latin like the violin because he liked it. That an argument. He said he couldn't make the boy believe he could find water with a hazel prong, which showed how much good school had ever done him. He wanted to go over that, but most of all, he thinks if he could have another chance to teach him how to build a load of hay. I know that's Silas' one accomplishment. He bundles every forkful in its place and tags and numbers it for future reference so he can find and easily dislodge it in the unloading. Silas does that well. He takes it out in bunches like big birds' nests. You never see him standing on the hay he's trying to lift, straining to lift himself. He thinks if he could teach him that, he'd be some good perhaps to someone in the world. He hates to see a boy the fool of books. Poor Silas. So concerned for other folk, and nothing to look backward to with pride, nothing to look forward to with hope. So now and never any different. Part of a moon was falling down the west, dragging the whole sky with it to the hills. Its light poured softly in her lap. She saw it and spread her apron to it. She put out her hand among the harp-like morning glory strings, taut with the dew from garden bed to eaves, as if she played unheard some tenderness that wrought on him beside her in the night. Warren, she said, he has come home to die. You needn't be afraid he'll leave you this time. Home, he mocked gently. Yes, what else but home? It all depends on what you mean by home. Of course, he's nothing to us, any more than was the hound that came a stranger to us out of the woods, worn out upon the trail. Home is the place where when you have to go there, they have to take you in. I should have called it something you somehow haven't to deserve. Warren leaned out and took a step or two, picked up a little stick, and brought it back and broke it in his hand and tossed it by. Silas has better claim on us, you think, than on his brother. 13 little miles as the road winds would bring him to his door. Silas has walked that far, no doubt, today. Why doesn't he go there? His brother's rich, a somebody, director in the bank. He never told us that. We know it, though. I think his brother ought to help, of course. I'll see to that if there is need. He ought of right to take him in and might be willing to. He may be better than appearances. But have some pity on Silas. Do you think if he had any pride in claiming kin or anything he looked for from his brother, he'd keep so still about him all this time? I wonder what's between them. I can tell you, Silas is what he is. We wouldn't mind him, but just the kind that kinsfolk can't abide. He never did a thing so very bad. He don't know why he isn't quite as good as anybody. Worthless though he were, he wouldn't be ashamed to please his brother. I can't think Si ever hurt anyone. No, but he hurt my heart, the way he lay and rolled his old head on that shop-head's chair back. He wouldn't let me put him on the lounge. You must go in and see what you can do. I made the bed up for him there tonight. You'll be surprised at him, how much he's broken. His working days are done, I'm sure of it. I'd not be in a hurry to say that. I haven't been. Go. Look. See for yourself. But, Warren, please remember how it is. He's come to help you ditch the meadow. He has a plan. You mustn't laugh at him. He may not speak of it, then he may. I'll sit and see if that small sailing cloud will hit or miss the moon. It hit the moon. Then there were three there making a dim row, the moon, the little silver cloud, and she. Warren returned, too soon, it seemed to her, slipped to her side, caught up her hand, and waited. "Warren?" she questioned. "Dead," was all he answered. I stayed the night for shelter at a farm behind the mountain with a mother and son, two old believers. They did all the talking. The mother says, "Folks think a witch who has familiar spirits she could call up to pass a winter evening, but won't. Should be burned at the stake or something. Summoning spirits isn't button who's got the button, I would have them know." The son, he's about 40 years old. "Mother can make a common table, rear and kick with two legs like an army mule." And she says, "And when I've done it, what good have I done? Rather than tip a table for you, let me tell you what Rawl, the Sioux control, once told me. He said the dead had souls, but when I asked him how that could be, I thought the dead were souls. He broke my trance. Don't that make you suspicious that there's something the dead are keeping back?" "Yes, there's something the dead are keeping back." Son says, You wouldn't want to tell him what we have up attic, Mother." "Bones. A skeleton. But the headboard of Mother's bed is pushed against the attic door. The door is nailed. It's harmless. Mother hears it in the night, halting perplexed behind the barrier of door and headboard. Where it wants to get is back into the cellar where it came from. We'll never let them, will we, son? We'll never. It left the cellar 40 years ago, he says, and carried itself like a pile of dishes up one flight from the cellar to the kitchen, another from the kitchen to the bedroom, another from the bedroom to the attic, right past both Father and Mother, and neither stopped it. Father had gone upstairs. Mother was downstairs. I was a baby. I don't know where I was. And she says, "The only fault my husband found with me, I went to sleep before I went to bed, especially in winter when the bed might just as well be ice and the clothes snow. The night the bones came up the cellar stairs, Toffel had gone to bed alone and left me, but left an open door to cool the room off so's to sort of turn me out of it. I was just coming to myself enough to wonder where the cold was coming from when I heard Toffel upstairs in the bedroom and thought I heard him downstairs in the cellar. The board we had laid down to walk dry shod on when there was water in the cellar in spring struck the hard cellar bottom. And then someone began the stairs, 2 footsteps for each step, the way a man with one leg and a crutch or little child comes up. It wasn't Toffel. It wasn't anyone who could be there. The bulkhead double doors were double locked and swollen tight and buried under snow. The cellar windows were banked up with sawdust and swollen tight and buried under snow. It was the bones. I know them, and good reason. My first impulse was to get to the knob and hold the door. But the bones didn't try the door. They halted, helpless, on the landing, waiting for things to happen in their favor. The faintest restless rustling ran all through them. I never could have done the thing I did if the wish hadn't been too strong in me to see how they were mounted for this walk. I had a vision of them put together, not like a man, but like a chandelier. So suddenly I flung the door wide on him. A moment he stood bouncing with emotion and all but lost himself. A tongue of fire flashed out and licked along his upper teeth. Smoke rolled inside the sockets of his eyes. Then he came at me with one hand outstretched the way he did in life once. But this time I struck the hand off brittle on the floor and fell back from him on the floor myself. The finger pieces slid in all directions. Where did I see one of those pieces lately? Hand me my button box. It must be there. I sat up on the floor and shouted, "Toffel, it's coming up to you." It had its choice of the door to the cellar or the hall. It took the hall door for the novelty. and set off briskly for so slow a thing, still going every which way in the joints, though, so that it looked like lightning or a scribble from the slap I had just now given its hand. I listened till it almost climbed the stairs from the hall to the only finished bedroom before I got up to do anything, then ran and shouted, "Shut the bedroom door, Toffel, for my sake." "Company?" he said. "Don't make me get up. I'm too warm in bed." So lying forward weakly on the handrail, I pushed myself upstairs, and in the light, the kitchen had been dark. I had to own I could see nothing. "Toffel, I don't see it. It's with us in the room, though. It's the bones." "What bones?" "The cellar bones, out of the grave." That made him throw his bare legs out of bed and sit up by me and take hold of me. I wanted to put out the light and see if I could see it, or else mow the room with our arms at the level of our knees and bring the chalk pile down. I'll tell you what, it's looking for another door to try. The uncommonly deep snow has made him think of his old song, the wild colonial boy he always used to sing along the tote road. He's after an open door to get outdoors. Let's trap him with an open door up attic. Toffel agreed to that. And sure enough, almost the moment he was given an opening, the steps began to climb the attic stairs. I heard them. Toffel didn't seem to hear them. Quick, I slammed to the door and held the knob. "Toffel, get nails." I made him nail the door shut and push the headboard of the bed against it. Then we asked, was there anything up attic that we'd ever want again? The attic was less to us than the cellar. If the bones liked the attic, let them have it. Let them stay in the attic. When they sometimes come down the stairs at night and stand perplexed behind the door and headboard of the bed, brushing their chalky skull with chalky fingers and sounds like the dry rattling of a shutter, that's what I sit up in the dark to say. To no one any more since Toffel died. Let them stay in the attic since they went there. I promised Toffel to be cruel to them, for helping them be cruel once to him. And the son says, "We think they have a grave down in the cellar." And she says, "We know they have a grave down in the cellar." And he says, "We never could find out whose bones they were." And she says, "Yes, we could too, son, tell the truth for once. They were a man's his father killed for me. I mean a man he killed instead of me. The least I could do was help dig their grave. We were about it one night in the cellar. Son knows the story, but 'twas not for him to tell the truth, suppose the time had come. Son looks surprised to see me end a lie we kept up all these years between ourselves so as to have it ready for outsiders. But tonight I don't care enough to lie. I don't remember why I ever cared. Toffel, if he were here, I don't believe could tell you why he ever cared. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that sends the frozen groundswell under it and spills the upper boulders in the sun and makes gaps even two can pass abreast. The work of hunters is another thing. I have come after them and made repair where they have left not one stone on a stone, but they would have the rabbit out of hiding to please the yelping dogs. The gaps I mean, no one has seen them made or heard them made. But at spring mending time we find them there. I let my neighbor know beyond the hill, and on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. We keep the wall between us as we go. To each the boulders that have fallen to each, and some are loaves and some so nearly balls we have to use a spell to make them balance. Stay where you are until our backs are turned. We wear our fingers rough with handling them. Oh, just another kind of outdoor game, one on a side. It comes to little more there where it is. We do not need the wall. He is all pine, and I am apple orchard. My apple trees will never get across and eat the cones on these pines, I tell him. He only says, good fences make good neighbors. Spring is the mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head. Why do they make good neighbors? Isn't it where there are cows? But here there are no cows. Before I build a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give offense. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down. I could say else to him, and I'd rather he said it for himself. I see him there, bringing a stone grasped firmly by the top in each hand, like an old stone savage armed. He moves in darkness, as it seems to me, not of woods only, in the shade of trees. He will not go behind his father's saying, and he likes having thought of it so well, he says again, good fences make good neighbors. I opened the door so my last look should be taken outside a house and book. Before I gave up seeing and slept, I said I would see how Sirius kept his watchdog eye on what remained to be gone into if not explained. But scarcely was my door ajar when past the leg I thrust for bar slipped in to be my problem guest, not a heavenly dog made manifest, but an earthly dog of the carriage breed, who, having failed of the modern speed, now asked asylum, and I was stirred to be the one so dog preferred. He dumped himself like a bag of bones. He sighed himself a couple of groans, and head to tail then firmly curled like swearing off on the traffic world. I set him water, I set him food. He rolled an eye with gratitude, or merely manners it may have been, but never so much as lifted chin. His hard tail loudly smacked the floor as if beseeching me, please, no more. I can't explain, tonight at least. His brow was perceptibly trouble-creased, so I spoke in tones of adoption thus, gusty old boy, Dalmatian Gus. You're right, there's nothing to discuss. Don't try to tell me what's on your mind, the sorrow of having been left behind, or the sorrow of having run away. All that can wait for the light of day. Meanwhile, feel obligation-free. Nobody has to confide in me. 'Twas too one-sided a dialogue, and I wasn't sure I was talking dog. I broke off, baffled, but all the same, in fancy I ratified his name, Gusty, Dalmatian Gus, that is, and started shaping my life to his, finding him his right supplies, and sharing his miles of exercise. Next morning, the minute I was about, he was at the door to be let out, as much as to say, I have paid my call. You mustn't feel hurt if now I'm all for getting back somewhere or further on. I opened the door, and he was gone. I was to taste in little the grief that comes of dogs' lives being so brief, only a fraction of ours at most. He might have been the dream of a ghost, in spite of the way his tail had smacked my floor so hard and matter-of-fact. And things have been going so strangely since, I wouldn't be too hard to convince I might even claim he was Sirius. Think of presuming to call him Gus. The star itself, heaven's greatest star, not a meteorite, but an avatar, who had made this overnight descent to show by deeds he didn't resent my having depended on him so long, and yet done nothing about it in song. A symbol was all he could hope to convey, an intimation, a shot of ray, a meaning I was supposed to seek, and finding not necessarily speak. An ant on the tablecloth ran into a dormant moth of many times his size. He showed not the least surprise. His business wasn't with such. He gave it scarcely a touch and was off on his duty run. But if he encountered one of the hive's inquiry squad, whose work is to find out God and the nature of time and space, he would put him on to the case. Ants are a curious race, one crossing with hurried tread the body of one of their dead, isn't given a moment's rest, seems not even impressed. But he no doubt reports to any with whom he crosses antennae, and they no doubt report to the higher up at court. Then word goes forth in Formic, deaths come to Jerry McCormick, our selfless forager Jerry. Will the special janissary, whose office it is to bury the dead of the commissary, go bring him home to his people, lay him in state on a steeple, wrap him for shroud in a petal, embalm him with ichor of nettle? This is the word of your queen, and presently on the scene appears a solemn mortician, and taking formal position, with feelers calmly a-twiddle, seizes the dead by the middle, and heaving him high in air, carries him out of there. No one stands round to stare. It is nobody else's affair. It couldn't be called ungentle, but a thoroughly departmental. A speck that would have been beneath my sight on any but a paper sheet so white set off across what I had written there, and I had idly poised my pen in air to stop it with a period of ink, when something strange about it made me think. This was no dust speck by my breathing blown, but unmistakably a living mite with inclinations it could call its own. It paused as with suspicion of my pen, and then came racing wildly on again to where my manuscript was not yet dry, then paused again, and either drank or smelt with loathing, for again it turned to fly. Plainly with an intelligence I dealt. It seemed too tiny to have room for feet, yet must have had a set of them complete to express how much it didn't want to die. It ran with terror and with cunning crept. It faltered. I could see it hesitate. Then in the middle of the open sheet, carred down in desperation to accept whatever I accorded it of fate. I have none of the tenderer than thou collectivistic regimenting love with which the modern world is being swept. But this poor microscopic item now, since it was nothing I knew evil of, I let it lie there till I hope it slept. I have a mind myself, and recognize mind when I meet with it in any guise. No one can know how glad I am to find on any sheet the least display of mind. Sarcastic science, she would like to know in her complacent ministry of fear how we propose to get away from here when she has made things so we have to go or be wiped out. Will she be asked to show us how by rocket we may hope to steer to some star off there, say a half-light year through temperature of absolute zero? Why wait for science to supply the how when any amateur can tell it now? The way to go away should be the same as 50 billion years ago we came, if anyone remembers how that was. I have a theory, but it hardly does. A theory, if you hold it hard enough and long enough, gets rated as a creed, such as that flesh is something we can slough, so that the mind can be entirely freed. Then when the arms and legs have atrophied, and brain is all that's left of mortal stuff, we can lie on the beach with the seaweed and take our daily tide baths smooth and rough. There once we lay as blobs of jellyfish at evolution's opposite extreme, but now as blobs of brain we lie and dream, with only one vestigial creature wish. Oh, may the tide be soon enough and high to keep our abstract verse from getting dry. The witch that came, the withered hag, to wash the steps with pail and rag, was once the beauty Abishag, the picture pride of Hollywood. Too many fall from great and good for you to doubt the likelihood. Die early and avoid the fate. Or if predestined to die late, make up your mind to die in state. Make the whole stock exchange your own. If need be, occupy a throne where nobody can call you crone. Some have relied on what they knew, others on being simply true. What worked for them might work for you. No memory of having starred makes up for later disregard or keeps the end from being hard. Better to go down dignified with boughten friendship at your side than none at all. Provide, provide. And then I always like to add, or somebody else will provide for you. Not only sands and gravels were once more on their travels, but gulping muddy gallons, great boulders off their balance, bumped heads together dully and started down the gully. Whole capes caked off in slices. I felt my standpoint shaken in the universal crisis, but with one step backward taken, I saved myself from going. A world torn loose went by me, then the rain stopped, and the blowing, and the sun came out to dry me. O star, the fairest one in sight, we grant your loftiness the right to some obscurity of cloud. It will not do to say of night, since dark is what brings out your light. Some mystery becomes the proud, but to be wholly taciturn in your reserve is not allowed. Say something to us we can learn by heart, and when alone repeat. Say something, and it says, I burn. But say with what degree of heat, talk Fahrenheit, talk centigrade, use language we can comprehend. Tell us what elements you blend. It gives us strangely little aid, but does tell something in the end. And steadfast as Keats' eremite, not even stooping from its sphere, it asks a little of us here. It asks of us a certain height, so when at times the mob is swayed to carry praise or blame too far, we may take something like a star to stay our minds on and be stayed. Oh, stormy, stormy world, the days you were not swirled around with mist and cloud, or wrapped as in a shroud, and the sun's brilliant ball was not in part or all obscured from mortal view, were days so very few, I can but wonder whence I get the lasting sense of so much warmth and light. If my mistrust is right, it may be altogether from one day's perfect weather, when starting clear at dawn, the day swept clearly on to finish clear at eve. I verily believe my fair impression may be all from that one day, no shadow crossed but ours, as through its blazing flowers we went from house to wood for change of solitude. Out through the fields and the woods and over the walls I have wended. I have climbed the hills of view and looked at the world and descended. I have come by the highway home, and lo, it is ended. The leaves are all dead on the ground, save those that the oak is keeping, to ravel them one by one and let them go scraping and creeping out over the crusted snow when others are sleeping. And the dead leaves lie huddled and still, no longer blown hither and thither. The last lone aster is gone. The flowers of the witch hazel wither. The heart is still aching to seek, but the feet question whither. Ah, when to the heart of man was it ever less than a treason to go with the drift of things, to yield with a grace to reason, and bow and accept the end of a love or a season?